My name is Lucy Thompson, 28 years old, and I never thought I'd have to choose between family loyalty and self-respect. For years, I worked double shifts as a nurse, saving every extra dollar for my dream of opening a community health clinic. But in one family dinner, I discovered my parents had borrowed my entire savings account for my sister's extravagant wedding without asking me. What happened next changed our family forever. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever had your trust broken by family. I come from what most would call a typical middle-class family in Portland, Oregon. My parents, James and Dorothy Thompson, raised my older sister Amanda and me in a comfortable three-bedroom house in a nice neighborhood. We always had enough, but luxuries were carefully budgeted for special occasions. Growing up, I always sensed that Amanda held a special place in my parents' hearts. It wasn't anything that they explicitly said, but it showed in countless small ways. When Amanda turned 16, she received a used car with a big red bow in the driveway. For my 16th birthday 2 years later, I got a bus pass and a promise that I could use Mom's car on weekends if I paid for gas. When Amanda made the cheerleading squad, my parents attended every football game, even away games that required overnight stays. When I qualified for the state science competition 3 years in a row, they made it to one event, arriving late and leaving early for a dinner reservation they'd forgotten to cancel. These patterns continued throughout our childhood, but I tried not to let it bother me. I told myself that Amanda simply needed more attention, or perhaps her achievements aligned more closely with what my parents valued. Instead of dwelling on it, I focused on building my own path. From an early age, I was drawn to healthcare. At 8, I memorized all the bones in the human body. By 12, I was volunteering at the local animal shelter, helping with basic care procedures. In high school, I joined a medical explorers program that allowed students to shadow healthcare professionals. The first time I watched a nurse comfort a frightened child while skillfully inserting an IV, I knew exactly what I wanted to do with my life. After nursing school, I secured a position at Providence Portland Medical Center in the emergency department. The work was challenging, but deeply fulfilling. Every day brought new patients with different needs, from minor injuries to life-threatening emergencies. I loved being the calm in someone's storm, providing competent care during their worst moments. But as much as I enjoyed hospital nursing, I noticed gaps in our healthcare system. Too often, I'd treat patients for preventable complications because they couldn't afford regular care or medications. Elderly patients would return repeatedly because they lacked proper follow-up support. Young parents would use the emergency room for routine childhood illnesses because they couldn't get timely pediatric appointments. That's when my dream began taking shape. I envisioned a community health clinic that would provide affordable, accessible care to underserved neighborhoods, a place where people could receive preventative services, management of chronic conditions, and health education without financial barriers. This wasn't just a passing idea. I created a detailed business plan with help from a friend who had an MBA. I researched grant opportunities and nonprofit healthcare models. I networked with community leaders and other healthcare professionals who shared my vision. And most importantly, I started saving aggressively. For 6 years, I lived well below my means. I shared an apartment with 2 other nurses to keep rent low. I drove the same reliable but unfashionable car I'd purchased during nursing school. I packed lunches limited dining out and learned to find free or inexpensive entertainment options. Every month, I automatically transferred 40% of my paycheck into a dedicated savings account that I never touched. By my 28th birthday, I had accumulated $78,000. Not enough for the entire clinic's startup costs, but sufficient to secure matching grants and demonstrate serious commitment to potential investors. I was proud of this achievement and the discipline it represented. It wasn't just money in the bank, it was the physical manifestation of thousands of extra hours worked and hundreds of small sacrifices made. Through all of this, my boyfriend Nate was my biggest supporter. We'd met during my final year of nursing school, when he came to the emergency department with a broken wrist from a rock climbing accident. He was immediately different from other guys I dated, asking thoughtful questions about my career plans, rather than trying to impress me with his own accomplishments. Nate worked as an environmental engineer, designing sustainable water systems for communities both locally and internationally. He understood passion projects and the dedication they required. On evenings when I was exhausted after a 12-hour shift, but still reviewing clinic floor plans or grant applications, he'd bring me tea and offer substantive feedback rather than suggesting I take a break. While I was methodically building toward my goal, Amanda was living a very different life. After college, she landed a job at a prestigious marketing firm and quickly climbed the corporate ladder. She dressed impeccably, took luxurious vacations, and lived in a stylish downtown apartment that cost more than triple my share of rent. My parents beamed with pride at her glamorous life and successful career. 2 years ago, Amanda met Jackson during a business trip to Seattle. He was a third-generation real estate developer whose family owned prominent properties throughout the Pacific Northwest. After dating for 18 months, they announced their engagement at my parents' anniversary dinner, complete with a 3-carat diamond ring that caught every bit of light in the restaurant. Almost immediately, wedding planning consumed all family conversations. Amanda envisioned a spectacular event at an exclusive vineyard in Willamette Valley wine country. She wanted a weekend-long celebration, with a welcome dinner, the ceremony and reception, followed by a farewell brunch. Her guest list included 250 people, many of whom were Jackson's family business connections. The estimated cost quickly ballooned to $150,000. Jackson's parents offered to pay half operating under the traditional assumption that the bride's family would cover the remainder. This created immediate tension. My parents earned comfortable but not excessive incomes as a high school principal and dental hygienist. They had some savings, but nowhere near $75,000 for a one-day event. Initially, my parents gently suggested scaling back certain elements, perhaps choosing a less exclusive venue, or reducing the guest count. Amanda would tearfully refuse, insisting this was her once-in-a-lifetime day, and she shouldn't have to compromise her vision. These conversations inevitably ended with my mother comforting Amanda, while my father looked worried about the financial implications. As the deposits came due and vendor contracts required signatures, the pressure intensified. During family dinners, Amanda would excitedly share details about specialty cocktails, custom floral arrangements, or the string quartet she'd booked, while my father's expression grew increasingly strained. Eventually, the focus turned to me. My mother casually mentioned that Lucy has quite a bit saved up during a wedding planning session. Amanda immediately brightened, suggesting I could loan them $20,000 as my gift to the couple. I firmly declined, explaining that my savings were designated for the clinic and not available for other purposes. This led to uncomfortable silences during family gatherings and pointed comments about selfishness and family priorities. I stood my ground, but the tension was palpable. Little did I know that my parents had already formulated a plan that didn't require my consent. It was a Tuesday evening in April when I logged into my online banking to pay bills. I'd just finished a grueling 12-hour shift in the emergency department, treating a steady stream of patients, including a major car accident with multiple injuries. All I wanted was to complete my monthly financial tasks and collapse into bed. When I clicked on my savings account, I stared at the screen in disbelief. The balance read $2,342.17. Just last month, the account had contained $78,412. I refreshed the page, thinking it must be a technical glitch, but the number remained unchanged. My heart raced as I scrolled through recent transactions. There were 3 large withdrawals over the past month, systematically emptying nearly my entire account. Each withdrawal was labeled with my father's name as the authorizing party. This made no sense. Years ago, when I first opened the account as a teenager, my father had been added as a secondary account holder in case of emergencies. As an 18-year-old with no financial experience, this had seemed logical. As I established my independent adult life, I simply never thought to remove his access, naively assuming it wasn't necessary. I immediately called the bank's 24-hour customer service line, my voice shaking as I explained the situation. The representative calmly confirmed that the withdrawals were properly authorized by a legal account holder and not fraudulent in the technical sense. When I pressed for more details, she explained that my father had appeared in person at 3 different branch locations, each time withdrawing substantial amounts. That night, I barely slept. I alternated between tearful disbelief and cold anger. By morning, I had composed a text message to my parents, requesting their presence at dinner that evening to discuss an urgent financial matter. My mother quickly responded with concern, asking if I was in some kind of trouble. I didn't elaborate, knowing this conversation needed to happen in person. I spent the day in a fog going through the motions at work, while my mind raced with questions. What possible explanation could justify taking my life savings without even discussing it with me first? Was there some family emergency I wasn't aware of? Had my father developed a gambling problem or gotten involved in something illegal? None of these scenarios seemed plausible, yet the alternative was almost unthinkable. That evening, I arrived at my parents' house with a folder containing my bank statements and the information I'd gathered from the customer service representative. My hands trembled slightly as I rang the doorbell of the home where I'd grown up feeling like a stranger about to deliver bad news. My mother greeted me with her usual warm hug, commenting that I looked tired. My father called out a hello from the kitchen where he was uncorking a bottle of wine. The familiar sense of my mother's lasagna filled the house, creating a jarring contrast with the confrontation I was about to initiate. We made small talk through the salad course, discussing hospital gossip and neighborhood updates. Finally, as my mother served the main dish, I took a deep breath and placed my folder on the table. I checked my savings account yesterday. I began, keeping my voice steady. Almost all of my money is gone. $76,000 was withdrawn in the past month. I opened the folder and slid the bank statement across the table. Dad, it shows you made these withdrawals. I need to understand what's happening. I expected shock, perhaps shame or embarrassment. What I didn't anticipate was the casual shrug my father gave as he served himself another portion of lasagna. We had to borrow some money for Amanda's wedding, he said, as if commenting on the weather. The venue required a 50% deposit, and the caterer needed to be paid in full. You know how these wedding vendors are, everything due up front. I stared at him, momentarily speechless. Borrow, you took $76,000 without asking me or even telling me? My mother reached across the table and patted my hand. Honey, we were going to discuss it with you, but you've been so rigid about your clinic savings. Amanda needed this for her special day, and family helps family. Her special day cost $76,000. I asked incredulously. That's almost everything I've saved over 6 years. Well, there were other expenses too, my father explained between bites. Jackson's parents expected certain elements to meet their standards. The welcome dinner alone was $22,000, and Amanda deserved the wedding dress she fell in love with, even if it was a bit pricey. We'll pay you back eventually, my mother added with a dismissive wave. Once things settle down after the honeymoon. You're young, you have plenty of time to save up again. As their words sank in, my initial shock transformed into seething anger. They hadn't acted out of desperation or emergency. They had systematically drained my account to fund an extravagant wedding for my sister, expecting me to simply accept it. This isn't a small loan between family members, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. This is my entire financial future, years of sacrifices taken without my knowledge or permission. How could you possibly think this was okay? My father's expression hardened. Listen, Lucy, we've always supported both you girls equally. Amanda needs this money now for her wedding. You can rebuild your savings for your clinic idea, which frankly might never happen anyway. Equally? I laughed bitterly. When have you ever supported us equally? And my clinic isn't some vague idea I was waiting to work on. I have business plans, potential partners, and was ready to apply for matching grants next month. Now that's all delayed indefinitely. The doorbell rang, interrupting our increasingly heated exchange. My mother hurried to answer it, returning moments later with Amanda, who apparently had stopped by to drop off wedding invitation samples. What's going on? Amanda asked, noting the tension in the room. Why does everyone look so serious? My mother quickly filled her in, framing the situation as me being upset about their temporary loan from my savings for wedding expenses. Amanda's response cut deeper than my parents' justifications. Oh my God, Lucy, don't be so dramatic, she said, rolling her eyes. It's just money. You can save up again. This is my wedding. We're talking about a once-in-a-lifetime event. Your clinic thing can wait. Something snapped inside me. Years of accepting second place, of understanding, of making excuses for their favoritism, culminated in this moment of absolute clarity. I stood up, gathering my documents with shaking hands. My clinic thing was my dream. My future built with thousands of hours of extra shifts and sacrifices you've never had to make, I said quietly. And you all took it without a second thought because Amanda's wedding centerpieces and monogrammed cocktail napkins were more important than my life's work. I walked toward the door, turning back one last time. This isn't just about money. It's about respect, and clearly none of you have any for me. As I drove away, tears streaming down my face, I realized that more than my savings had been lost that night. The foundation of trust I thought existed in my family had been shattered beyond recognition. The next few weeks passed in a blur of emotions. The night of the confrontation, I drove straight to Nate's apartment, barely able to explain what had happened through my tears. As I recounted the conversation, his expression transformed from concern to disbelief to outright fury. "They stole from you," he stated flatly when I finished. "There's no other word for it. We need to talk to a lawyer immediately." The following day, Nate connected me with his friend Rachel, who specialized in family law. She listened sympathetically to my situation before explaining my options. Since my father was technically a legal account holder, the withdrawals weren't considered theft in a criminal sense. I could pursue a civil case, but it would be complicated by the joint account arrangement and potentially devastating to family relationships. Family financial disputes are among the most painful cases I handle, Rachel explained gently. You have legitimate grounds for a lawsuit, but I want you to carefully consider whether that's the path you want to take. Sometimes the emotional cost exceeds the financial one. I left her office with information to consider, but no clear direction. Meanwhile, the calls and texts from my family began. My mother left daily voicemails that evolved from apologetic to increasingly frustrated. "Lucy, you need to get over this," she said 5 days after our confrontation. "We're all trying to move forward with wedding planning, and your silence is making things awkward. Amanda needs your measurements for the bridesmaid dress." My father's approach was more direct. "This childish silent treatment needs to stop," he texted. "We've always been there for you. One family sacrifice shouldn't erase everything we've done as your parents." The most hurtful messages came from Amanda. "I can't believe you're making my wedding about you," she wrote. "Mom cries every day because of your selfishness. Is that what you want, to ruin this special time for everyone?" It wasn't just my immediate family. Aunts, uncles, and cousins began reaching out, most without full knowledge of what had transpired. They delivered variations of the same message. Family comes first. Forgiveness is important. Holding grudges only hurts yourself. Under this barrage, I began questioning my own reaction. Was I overreacting? Was I being selfish for not immediately forgiving them? The doubt crept in during quiet moments, undermining my conviction. Recognizing I needed objective support, I started seeing a therapist named Dr. Winters. In our sessions, she helped me understand that my feelings of betrayal and anger were entirely justified, and that the pressure to quickly forgive was itself a problematic pattern. "What your parents did was a significant boundary violation," she explained. "Healthy relationships require respect for each other's autonomy and property. Their expectation that you should simply accept this and move on suggests they don't recognize the severity of their actions." With Dr. Winter's guidance, I drafted a letter to my parents outlining a concrete repayment plan. I proposed monthly payments of $1,500, which would restore my savings over approximately 4 years. The letter was factual and unemotional, treating the situation as a business arrangement rather than a family dispute. To my surprise, they initially agreed. The first payment arrived on time, followed by the second. With the third payment came a note suggesting I could demonstrate good faith by participating in Amanda's wedding planning. The fourth payment was late and accompanied by excuses about unexpected expenses. The fifth never came at all, despite multiple reminders. Meanwhile, a thick cream envelope arrived containing Amanda's wedding invitation, along with a separate note requesting I serve as a bridesmaid. The expectation was clear: I was to set aside my feelings and play my assigned role in the perfect family tableau. After careful consideration and several therapy sessions, I declined the bridesmaid role. I wrote Amanda a private email explaining that while I wished her happiness in her marriage, I wasn't in a place emotionally where I could fulfill bridesmaid duties with the enthusiasm she deserved. Her response was immediate and explosive. She called me crying, nearly incoherent with anger. How could you do this to me? My own sister refusing to stand with me on the most important day of my life. What am I supposed to tell people? Tell them the truth, I suggested, that there's a family disagreement about money that we're working through. No one needs to know our private business, she shouted. You're trying to punish me for something mom and dad did. This is just jealousy because I'm getting married before you, even though you and Nate have been together longer. This accusation was so far from reality that I couldn't even formulate a response. After Amanda hung up, my parents called within minutes, clearly having heard her version of events. This has gone far enough, my father said sternly. You will be at your sister's wedding, you will be a bridesmaid, and you will act like a member of this family. If you can't do that, don't consider yourself our daughter anymore. His ultimatum hung in the air, heavy with implication. My mother added softly, Lucy, please. We can work through the money issue later. Right now, we need to focus on Amanda's happiness. That phrase, Amanda's happiness, crystallized something I'd felt my entire life, but never fully acknowledged. In my family's hierarchy of needs, Amanda's happiness had always outranked mine, from childhood birthday parties to adult financial decisions. I need time to think about this, I told them, ending the call before more ultimatums could be issued. That evening, Nate and I took a long walk through the neighborhood, discussing the situation from every angle. Though he was firmly in my corner, he also acknowledged the permanent consequences that might come from refusing to attend the wedding at all. Whatever you decide, I'll support you completely, he assured me. Just make sure it's a decision you can live with long term. After days of reflection, I made the painful choice to decline attending the wedding entirely. I wrote a formal letter to my parents and sister, explaining that I couldn't, in good conscience, celebrate an event that was partially financed through the unauthorized use of my savings, particularly when there seemed to be no serious intention to make restitution. I closed by saying I remained open to rebuilding our relationship in the future, but only with clear boundaries and mutual respect established first. It was the hardest letter I'd ever written, each word weighted with the understanding that it might permanently alter my family dynamics. The response was swift and multi-channeled. My sister blocked me on all social media platforms. Extended family members I rarely spoke with sent messages expressing their disappointment in me. My mother left tearful voicemails about how I was breaking her heart. My father didn't contact me directly, but I heard through a cousin that he was telling family members I had mental health issues that explained my irrational behavior. Most painfully, Amanda's maid of honor, a childhood friend of ours, orchestrated a social media campaign implying I had abandoned my sister due to jealousy and selfishness. Old school acquaintances and distant relatives who knew nothing of the actual situation felt entitled to weigh in, creating a narrative where I was unquestionably the villain. During this difficult period, unexpected support emerged from two cousins on my mother's side. They reached out privately to share their own experiences with family financial exploitation, offering both validation and practical advice for establishing boundaries. Their solidarity was a lifeline when I felt most isolated from my family network. At work, maintaining professional composure became increasingly challenging. Colleagues noticed my distraction and emotional fragility, but I shared minimal details, embarrassed by the entire situation. My nursing director, sensing something was wrong, offered flexibility with my schedule and checked in regularly, small kindnesses that meant more than she could know. The wedding date approached and passed. Through mutual connections, I learned it had proceeded exactly as planned, an extravagant celebration with no apparent financial constraints. Social media filled with professional photographs showing my family looking completely happy, my absence apparently unnoticed amidst the celebration. Those images triggered a profound period of grief and doubt. Had I made the right choice? Was my absence even meaningful to them, or had I only hurt myself by taking this stand? The question circled endlessly, keeping me awake at night and distracted during the day. By this point, my parents had made only $4,500 in repayments before stopping completely. My dream of opening the clinic seemed increasingly distant, requiring me to essentially restart my savings plan from scratch. The practical reality of that loss compounded the emotional one, creating a perfect storm of stress and uncertainty about my future. 3 months after Amanda's wedding, I arrived home from a night shift to find my parents sitting in their car outside my apartment building. I hadn't seen them since the confrontational dinner where I discovered the theft of my savings, and their unexpected appearance sent adrenaline coursing through my exhausted body. For a moment, I considered walking past and ignoring them, but curiosity won out. Perhaps they'd had a change of heart and were bringing a substantial repayment. Maybe they'd finally recognized the severity of their actions and came to make genuine amends. Those hopeful thoughts evaporated as soon as they approached. My father's expression was stern, my mother's tearful, but with an underlying hardness that I recognized from childhood confrontations, when she'd already decided I was in the wrong. "We need to talk," my father said without greeting. "This has gone on long enough." I reluctantly invited them up to my apartment, silently grateful that Nate had stayed over the night before and was inside preparing breakfast. His presence would provide both moral support and a witness to whatever was about to unfold. Once inside, my parents settled on the couch, while I remained standing, creating physical distance that mirrored the emotional gulf between us. Nate emerged from this kitchen, introduced himself politely but coolly, then positioned himself near me in a subtle show of solidarity. "Thanksgiving is next week," my mother began. "The whole family will be gathering at Aunt Susan's house, including Amanda and Jackson. We expect you to be there." There was no question in her tone, no request or invitation, simply an expectation of compliance. I took a deep breath, centering myself as Dr. Winters had taught me. "I'm not ready for a family gathering yet," I replied calmly. "There are still unresolved issues between us that need addressing first." My father's face reddened. "For God's sake, Lucy, enough with the unresolved issues. We're your parents. We raised you, fed you, put you through nursing school. If we needed some money for your sister's wedding, you should consider it part of what you owe us for everything we've done for you." His words stunned me into momentary silence. "Owe them for fulfilling the basic obligations they took on when they chose to have children." "I don't owe you the savings I worked 80-hour weeks to accumulate," I finally responded. "And you didn't need some money. You took $76,000 without asking, nearly emptying my account." "We always intended to pay you back," my mother interjected, though her tone lacked conviction. "Did you?" I challenged, "because after 4 partial payments you stopped completely. That doesn't suggest serious intention to repay $76,000. My father shifted uncomfortably before his expression hardened. "Look, realistically, we're not in a position to repay that entire amount. Amanda's wedding was expensive, and we have our retirement to consider. We thought you'd understand that family finances sometimes require flexibility." The casual admission that they never truly intended to repay me felt like a physical blow. All these months I'd been operating under the assumption that they recognized their obligation, but were struggling to fulfill it. The reality was much simpler and more painful. They felt entitled to my money and saw no real need to return it. "That's not how this works," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "You took my savings without permission. You promised to repay it. Those aren't optional commitments you can just decide to abandon when they become inconvenient." My mother's expression shifted to something I recognized from childhood, the martyred look that preceded claims about ungrateful children and parental sacrifices. "After everything we've done for you," she began predictably, "this is how you repay us, with legal threats and refusing to see your family. Do you know how much you've hurt Amanda? How much you've embarrassed us with the rest of the family?" "I'm not responsible for your embarrassment," I replied. "Your actions created this situation, not mine." My father stood suddenly, pointing his finger at me. "Enough. This ends now. You will be at Thanksgiving dinner. You will act normal and stop this ridiculous grudge. If you don't, there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" I asked, genuinely curious what leverage he thought he still held over my adult life. "For starters, I still know several board members at your hospital," he said coldly. "One conversation about your mental instability and tendency to hold irrational grudges could raise serious concerns about your fitness as a nurse." The threat to my professional reputation and livelihood crossed a line I hadn't anticipated. Nate, who had been silently observing, stepped forward. "I think you should leave now," he said firmly. Threatening someone's career because they want you to return money you took without permission isn't something loving parents do. It's what manipulators do when they're losing control. My father turned his anger toward Nate. "This is a family matter. You have no place in this conversation." "Lucy is my family, too," Nate responded calmly. "And I'm not going to stand by while you threaten and manipulate her." For several tense moments, my father looked like he might escalate the confrontation further. Instead, he grabbed his coat and headed for the door, my mother hurrying after him. At the threshold, he turned back. "You need to decide if you want to be part of this family or not, Lucy. Because right now you're throwing away 28 years of relationship over money." The door closed behind them, with finality, leaving a silence that seemed to vibrate with unsaid words and raw emotion. I sank onto the couch, overwhelmed by the confrontation and the naked truth it had revealed. This wasn't really about money. It was about control, about my willingness to accept whatever treatment they deemed appropriate, without question. The tears came suddenly and uncontrollably, great heaving sobs that felt torn from some deep wounded place inside me. Nate held me without speaking, understanding that no words could adequately address what had just transpired. My entire understanding of my family relationship had been permanently altered, stripped of comfortable illusions about unconditional love and support. After the crying subsided, a strange emptiness followed. I felt hollowed out, but also lighter somehow, as if releasing those emotions had created space for something new. The grief remained, but alongside it grew a quiet, steady certainty that I had witnessed something important about my family dynamics that I could no longer unsee or excuse away. That evening, I called Dr. Winters and scheduled an emergency session. I needed professional guidance to process what had happened and to navigate the complex grief of losing my family, not through death, but through the painful recognition of who they truly were versus who I had always wanted them to be. In the days that followed, I experienced anxiety and depression unlike anything I'd felt before. The foundation of my identity, the basic security of family belonging, had been fundamentally shaken. I questioned memories from throughout my life, wondering how many family interactions I had misinterpreted or excused. The pattern of favoritism toward Amanda now seemed less like isolated incidents and more like a consistent, intentional dynamic. Nate became worried as my emotional state deteriorated. He gently suggested I consider medication to help manage the anxiety that was disrupting my sleep and affecting my work. Initially resistant, I eventually agreed to see my primary care physician, who prescribed a short-term anti-anxiety medication and strongly endorsed continuing therapy. The medication helped stabilize my immediate symptoms, creating enough emotional breathing room to begin processing the situation more clearly. With this slight distance from the overwhelming emotions, I could finally see that what my family had done wasn't just about financial exploitation. It was part of a lifelong pattern of emotional abuse that I had normalized and accommodated. This recognition, though painful, became the turning point in my journey. Understanding the true nature of the problem meant I could finally address it appropriately, instead of continuing to seek validation and fairness from people who were fundamentally unwilling to provide it. In the weeks following my parents' unexpected visit and disturbing threats, I met with both Dr. Winters and Rachel, the attorney, who had initially advised me. The clarity gained from my parents' admission that they never truly intended to repay the full amount changed the calculation considerably. Their explicit statement that they don't plan to return your money strengthens your case significantly, Rachel explained, and their threat against your professional reputation could constitute attempted blackmail, which further undermines their position. We discussed the option of small claims court, which in our state could handle cases up to $10,000. While this wouldn't recover the full amount, it would establish a legal record of the debt and potentially enable further action. For the remaining balance, we could pursue a separate civil suit, though that would be more complicated and expensive. Legal action is never ideal between family members, Rachel acknowledged. But sometimes it's the only language that gets through when reasonable discussion has failed. Meanwhile, Dr. Winters helped me process the emotional aspects of this decision. Taking legal action against your parents is undoubtedly painful, she said, but consider the message sent by not holding them accountable both to yourself and to them. What boundaries will be respected in the future if this violation is ultimately accepted? After careful consideration, I decided to proceed with small claims court as a first step. I meticulously documented the unauthorized withdrawals, the partial repayments, and all communications regarding the money. Rachel helped me prepare my testimony, anticipating potential defenses my parents might offer. Before filing, I sent one final certified letter to my parents, detailing the exact amount taken, acknowledging the partial repayments, and offering a structured payment plan to avoid legal proceedings. I gave them 14 days to respond with either acceptance or an alternative proposal. The deadline passed without response. 3 days later, I received a text message from my father that simply read, "Do what you feel you need to do. Don't expect us to welcome you back when you realize what a mistake this is." With that final confirmation that they had no intention of addressing the situation reasonably, I filed the paperwork for small claims court. The process was straightforward, but emotionally draining, requiring me to formally accuse my own parents of financial wrongdoing in official legal documents. News of the filing spread quickly through the family grapevine. My mother's sister called, alternating between pleading for me to reconsider and criticizing me for airing family laundry in public. Amanda sent a scathing email accusing me of trying to steal attention during her newlywed period. Various cousins and family friends reached out, most taking my parents' side based on whatever version of events they had heard. The most surprising response came from Jackson's parents. They contacted me directly, requesting a private meeting at their downtown office. Unsure of their motives, but curious, I agreed, asking Nate to accompany me for support. Thomas and Eleanor Grant welcomed us into a sleek conference room with unexpected warmth. They explained that they had heard conflicting stories about my absence from the wedding and wanted to understand my perspective. I hesitantly shared the bare facts, expecting them to defend Amanda and my parents. Instead, Thomas leaned forward with a troubled expression. "We were told our contribution to the wedding was being matched by your parents," he explained. "Had we known they were using your savings without permission, we would have handled things very differently." Eleanor nodded in agreement. "We've been concerned about some of Amanda and your parents' financial decisions during the wedding planning. This puts those concerns in a new light. While they couldn't directly intervene in my family dispute, they offered character references if needed for court, and more importantly, their moral support." "Family disagreements are painful," Eleanor said as we were leaving. "But financial exploitation is never acceptable regardless of the relationship." Their validation provided unexpected strength as the court date approached. Despite increasing pressure from extended family to drop the case, I remained resolute. This wasn't just about recovering money anymore. It was about establishing that I deserved basic respect and had the right to defend my boundaries. The morning of the hearing arrived with a mix of anxiety and determination. The small claims courtroom was less formal than I'd imagined, more like a conference room with a judge's bench at the front. My parents arrived with Amanda in tow, but without legal representation, as was typical for these proceedings. We sat on opposite sides of the room, the physical distance emphasizing the emotional chasm between us. My mother avoided eye contact, staring at her folded hands. My father maintained a stern expression, occasionally whispering to Amanda, who glared openly in my direction. When our case was called, the judge, an older woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose, reviewed the filed documents before asking each party to present their position. I spoke first, concisely explaining how my father had withdrawn $76,000 from a joint account without my knowledge or consent, had made partial repayments before stopping, and had explicitly stated they did not intend to return the full amount. When it was my parents' turn, their defense shocked me. My father claimed the money had been a gift to Amanda for her wedding. When the judge asked why I would suddenly gift such a large sum after previously refusing to contribute, my mother tearfully suggested I had changed my mind, but now regretted my generosity. The judge looked skeptical, asking if they had any documentation of this alleged gift, such as a card, email, or witness statement from when I supposedly offered it. They did not. Furthermore, the judge noted, reviewing my documentation, The partial repayment suggests this was understood by all parties to be a loan, not a gift. One doesn't repay gifts. After brief deliberation, the judge ruled entirely in my favor, awarding the maximum small claims amount of $10,000 plus court costs. She also stated on record that her ruling did not prevent me from pursuing the remaining balance through civil court if I chose to do so. As we left the courtroom, I felt no triumph, only a hollow vindication and lingering sadness that our family relationship had deteriorated to this point. My parents and Amanda departed without speaking to me, the gulf between us seemingly wider than ever. The legal victory proved to be just the beginning of another challenge. Despite the court order, my parents made no effort to pay the judgment. Rachel explained that we would need to pursue enforcement measures, potentially including wage garnishment, a concept that seemed unimaginable when applied to my own father's paycheck. Yet this was the reality I now faced. After filing additional paperwork and paying more fees, the garnishment process began automatically deducting payment from my father's principal salary. It was a legally sound but emotionally devastating solution that finalized the adversarial nature of our relationship. Throughout this difficult period, Nate remained my steadfast support, never questioning my decisions or suggesting I should compromise my principles for the sake of family peace. His unwavering belief in my right to be treated with respect strengthened my resolve during moments of doubt. Family should lift you up, not tear you down, he reminded me during a particularly difficult evening after receiving a hurtful message from an aunt. The people who truly love you want what's best for you, not what's most convenient for them. Those words would become a touchstone in the months ahead, as I navigated the complex process of rebuilding my life and identity, separate from the family narrative that had shaped me for 28 years. 1 year after the court judgment, my life had transformed in ways both challenging and unexpectedly positive. The financial recovery was progressing steadily, if slowly. Between the garnishment payments and my renewed aggressive saving plan, I had accumulated almost $20,000 toward rebuilding my clinic fund. While this was far from my original position, I had used the setback as an opportunity to refine and strengthen my clinic business plan. I consulted with a nonprofit healthcare advisor who identified potential grant sources I hadn't previously considered and suggested structural changes that would make the project more resilient. Sometimes a delay isn't just an obstacle, she told me during one consultation. It's a chance to build something even better than your original vision. Her words proved prophetic. The revised clinic model incorporated telehealth services and community health worker outreach that my original plan had overlooked. These additions would allow for broader impact with lower initial capital requirements, potentially serving more people more effectively than my first concept. My personal life had similarly evolved in unexpected ways. Nate proposed on a quiet evening at home, presenting not just a ring, but a handwritten letter expressing his admiration for how I had handled the past year's challenges with integrity and courage. "You showed me what real strength looks like," he wrote. "Not the absence of pain or doubt, but the willingness to face difficult truths and stand by your values even when it hurts. I want to build a life with someone who has that kind of character." We planned a small ceremony with chosen family friends and colleagues who had supported us throughout the ordeal. The guest list notably excluded my parents and Amanda, a painful acknowledgement of our current reality, but one that preserved the celebration's authenticity. In contrast to my strained relationship with my birth family, my connection with Nate's parents deepened considerably. Martha and Robert welcomed me with genuine warmth, never pressing for details about my family situation, but making it clear they considered me a daughter, regardless of official marriage status. "Family is what you create together," Martha told me during a Sunday dinner at their home. "The family you're born into is just the starting point, not necessarily the destination." This philosophy resonated deeply as Nate and I began discussing having children of our own. 3 months after the court case concluded, I discovered I was pregnant, an unexpected but welcome development that added both joy and complexity to our situation. News of the pregnancy eventually reached my parents through mutual acquaintances. After months of silence, my mother called, her voice tentative, as she congratulated me and expressed hope that the baby might bring the family back together. The timing of this reconciliation attempt, clearly motivated by the prospect of a grandchild, rather than recognition of their wrongdoing, left me wary. After careful consideration and several sessions with Dr. Winters, I responded with clear conditions for any future relationship. I'm open to rebuilding communication. I wrote in an email, but only with acknowledgement of what happened, genuine apology, and respect for my boundaries going forward. This isn't about punishing anyone. It's about establishing a healthy foundation for any future relationship. My mother responded with initial enthusiasm that quickly waned when she realized I was serious about requiring accountability, rather than simply sweeping past behavior under the rug. My father remained largely silent, communicating primarily through my mother, in brief, non-committal messages. Their struggle to accept my boundaries and autonomy was disappointing, but no longer surprising. Through therapy and distance, I had gained clarity about the dynamics that had shaped our family for decades. Their conditional love and support had always depended on my compliance with their expectations, particularly regarding my sister's precedence in family priorities. While navigating this complicated family landscape, I focused on building what Dr. Winters called my family of choice, surrounding myself with people who demonstrated consistent respect and genuine care. My emergency department colleagues organized a beautiful baby shower. Nate's extended family welcomed me into their holiday celebrations. Two couples from our apartment building, initially casual acquaintances, became close friends, who regularly shared meals and offered mutual support. These relationships lack the fraught history and emotional complexity of my birth family connections, offering instead a refreshing simplicity. We chose each other's company because it brought mutual joy and enrichment. Professionally, I found renewed purpose by launching a small pilot version of my community health clinic. Using the limited funds available, plus a matching grant from a local foundation, I established a weekly clinic offering basic preventative services in an underserved neighborhood community center. The operation was modest, staffed by volunteer nurses and a semi-retired physician I'd befriended during my hospital work. We provided health screenings, vaccination clinics, diabetes management education, and referrals to affordable care options. Though far from my original vision of a full-service clinic, this scaled-down version allowed me to begin making a tangible difference while continuing to build toward the larger goal. 6 months into this new chapter, Amanda unexpectedly reached out. Unlike my parents, her message contained something approaching genuine acknowledgement. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened," she wrote. "At first, I was just angry that you weren't there for my wedding. But as time passed, I started to see things differently. What Mom and Dad did with your savings wasn't right, and I benefited from it without considering what it cost you. I can't speak for them, but for my part, I'm sorry." This tentative olive branch led to a careful, limited renewal of communication. We met for coffee at a neutral location, the conversation awkward but civil. Amanda shared updates about her marriage and career, while I offered selective information about my pregnancy and clinic work. We tacitly avoided discussing our parents or the ongoing financial situation, focusing instead on rebuilding some basic level of sisterly connection. These small halting steps toward reconciliation with Amanda highlighted the absence of similar progress with my parents. Despite multiple opportunities, they remained unable or unwilling to acknowledge the fundamental breach of trust their actions had created. The garnishment payments continued to arrive as legally mandated, but were unaccompanied by any personal acknowledgement or communication. As my due date approached, I found myself reflecting deeply on the lessons of the past 18 months. What had begun as a devastating financial betrayal had evolved into a profound journey of self-discovery and boundary establishment. The money itself, while still important, had become secondary to the deeper understanding I'd gained about healthy relationships and self-worth. The realization that motivated me most powerfully was recognizing that the central issue had never really been about the $76,000. That sum represented something far more valuable: respect for my autonomy, recognition of my dreams, and basic trustworthiness in our relationship. My parents' willingness to take my savings wasn't just a financial decision. It was a statement about how they valued or failed to value me as an individual separate from their expectations and convenience. This understanding transformed my approach to all relationships. I became more discerning about who earned my trust, more confident in expressing my needs, and more willing to walk away from dynamics that diminished rather than enhanced my life. The pain of family estrangement remained, but it was increasingly balanced by the freedom and authenticity I discovered by refusing to participate in unhealthy patterns. As I prepared for motherhood, I committed to creating a family environment for my child that would prioritize mutual respect, clear boundaries, and unconditional love, not dependent on compliance or convenience. The legacy of my experience would be breaking the cycle of favoritism and conditional acceptance that had characterized my own upbringing. In the end, what my parents couldn't understand was that by taking my money, they had inadvertently given me something much more valuable: the clarity and courage to define myself outside their expectations and to build a life based on genuine respect and healthy boundaries. The financial loss was real and significant, but the personal growth it catalyzed was ultimately worth far more. I came to understand that family isn't just who you're born to, it's who sees your true worth, respects your boundaries, and values your happiness as much as their own. Sometimes those people share your DNA, and sometimes they enter your life through other pathways. The critical factor isn't the biological connection, but the quality of the relationship itself. This new understanding brought unexpected peace. While I remained open to eventual reconciliation with my parents if they could demonstrate genuine change, I no longer needed their approval or acceptance to validate my worth. My family circle had expanded to include those who had proven their love through actions, rather than merely claiming it through obligation. Sitting in the nursery, Nate and I had painted together, surrounded by gifts from friends who had become family. I placed a hand on my growing belly and made a silent promise to my child. You will always know your worth isn't tied to compliance. Your boundaries will be respected, and you will understand that love, real love, uplifts rather than diminishes. The journey ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, but I faced them with a stronger sense of self and clearer vision of what truly matters in relationships. The painful lesson my parents inadvertently taught me had become the foundation for a healthier, more authentic life than I might otherwise have built. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family expectations and your own well-being? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more journeys of finding strength through difficult family situations. Remember, sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones that ultimately set us free. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage in your own journey toward healthy relationships built on mutual respect.